Hello and welcome to the very first episode of University What, Why, How, a brand new podcast for anyone thinking about going to uni. My name is Zoe and I am your host today. This podcast will offer unbiased, impartial advice to anyone thinking of starting university or an apprenticeship. We'll tackle everything you need to know, including whether university is even the right call for you. Each episode will explore some aspect of the application process or the university experience, walking you through step by step, along with advice, support, and where we can, some personal stories from students who've already made the leap. This week, we're kicking off with a key one, the January UCAS deadline. If you're not sure what that is, don't worry, that's what we're here for. So what is the deadline? What do you need to do? And what does it mean if you miss it? On today's episode, I'm joined by Sam. And like me, she's part of the Schools and Colleges team here at Southampton Solent Uni. Part of our job is helping people understand and navigate their way through what's sometimes a complicated process. By the end of this episode, you'll hopefully feel a little clearer, a little calmer about the next steps in your journey to university. Sam, hello, how are you?
I'm good, thank you, Zoe. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Thank you so much for joining us here today.
No worries.
So, a lot of universities talk about UCAS. Could you tell us a little bit about what UCAS means and what actually is it?
Yeah, of course. So UCAS stands for the Universities and Colleges Admissions Service. It's a platform where UK undergraduate applications are submitted to universities. If you're in school or college at the moment, you may be hearing your careers advisors saying you need to put your application in, you need to submit it before the upcoming deadline. It's essentially a platform where you put all your basic information in, you put a personal statement in, and then you can apply to up to 5 universities at this point. It allows you to kind of filter down by the interests that you have, the kind of area that you might want to study, so you can filter by regions as well. It gives you a lot of flexibility to really do that research in course, region, whether you want a campus university or a city university. It really does give you that functionality to find the universities that are right for you.
So students have probably heard the term UCAS cycle. It's definitely something we throw about when we're on the road, talking to various students and people interested in university. Do you think you could briefly talk us through what the cycle is and maybe highlight any key points that students should be aware of?
Yeah, of course. The UCAS cycle is essentially referring to the key points throughout the journey to applying to university. So, for example, May is when UCAS opened last year for entry onto September 2025 courses. There's a deadline in October if you're interested in courses such as medicine or veterinary science. And then we obviously have this upcoming deadline in January for the majority of undergraduate courses starting this September. Within that, we then also have UCAS Extra, for example, which means if you're not holding an offer from your 5 universities you've applied to, or you've declined your offer, you can add 1 extra choice in, should you want to. But then outside of that, after the deadline, we do also have the option to apply up till June before we then go into clearing, which is another big part of the UCAS cycle.
Obviously, the title of this podcast, and you briefly referenced there, the January deadline.
Yeah.
What is that about? Is it something that students should be worried about? What is it a deadline for?
Essentially, the January deadline is in place as an equal consideration deadline. So it means that whether you applied on the first day of UCAS opening through until the last minute on that deadline day, your application will be considered in the exact same light as anybody else that's applied to the same course as you. There's no negative to applying 1 minute before the deadline versus somebody that applied on the first day of UCAS opening. It's really to keep that kind of equality across the board.
And so obviously we use the term deadline. That all sounds super intense and you have to get your application in before then. So what happens if perhaps a student misses that deadline? Does that mean it's too late? Can they not apply for university? How can it affect their application?
So without wanting to say that it's a massive psych, you can actually apply after the UCAS January deadline. You are just applying outside of that equal consideration deadline, and not all universities will take applications that are considered late. So for us, for example, we can take applications up until the end of June as part of a main cycle application. After that, you would then be a clearing applicant. But between the end of January through to the end of June, we can still take applications, and we would welcome applications throughout that time as well.
So it sounds like to me, if I miss the January deadline, all's not lost. Is that correct?
It is correct, but not when it comes to particularly competitive programmes.
Mm-hmm.
So if you know that you're applying to a competitive programme, we would always recommend getting your application in before that January deadline, because it means that your application will be seen in exactly the same light as everyone else that's applied within that time frame. Outside of that, say for example there's a programme that can only take 10 students, applications considered after that equal consideration deadline might not be as successful as the ones that fell within that time frame. If there's not enough space for a student, they will always prioritise an application received within that time frame. So if you apply after the deadline and there's enough spaces, then you will be considered in the same way that you'd expect to be within the main UCAS cycle. If that programme's had a number of applications, really high standard of application as well, if it comes down to them having to make a decision between two students, they will look at who applied first and who applied within that equal consideration deadline.
Okay. So obviously, maybe I am doing my application a little bit last minute. Maybe I've missed the deadline and I'm trying to get it in as quick as possible.
Yeah.
How long do you think an application should take? How long should I spend putting it together? What kind of timescale do you think we're looking at?
It really depends on how quickly you can get your first draft together, because we would never recommend submitting a first draft of anything. Write your personal statement. At the moment, it's 4,000 characters or 47 lines long. Get somebody to read it, get them to review it, have a look at it again, review it again, and then submit it once you know that you've gone through it with a fine-tooth comb and it's hitting all those key points that we look for in a personal statement. There's loads of resources online. Zoe's done a number of different sessions for Solent on this topic as well. There is so much help available out there to help you with your personal statement. In terms of time frame, it could take, I'd say, 7 to 10 days to get it really finessed and to get all that information into your UCAS application that you need. It's also worth bearing in mind that in your application, you do also need a reference from your teacher or your careers advisor, actually kind of backing up what you're saying in your personal statement as well. That can sometimes prove to be quite a lengthy process because college advisors, careers advisors, teachers have a number of these that they need to be doing. So I don't think they particularly like late applications, but I think it's just because it drags the work out for them.
And so obviously we've mentioned the personal statement a couple of times. Yeah. What is that? Is it an essay? Is it a CV? Is it a presentation? What is a personal statement?
It's essentially it's a Word document about yourself, essentially. It's a written piece about yourself. It's a chance for you to showcase why you are the right person for the course that you're applying to. Your experiences on your A-levels or your B-Techs or in school that make you suitable for the programme, any extracurricular activity you do that make you suitable. But essentially, our academic staff want to read a personal statement and think, I really want this person on my programme. I want to teach them in 3-4 years with studying with us. I know I can make them into a professional within this field. You don't have to have had experience relevant to the course, but you just have to show that passion and understanding. And really, it's providing the evidence that you understand the programme as well. I used to work in admissions at another university, and we used to get a lot of midwifery applications where somebody would say, I love watching One Born every minute. And that was never a good start to a personal statement, because you'd be like, okay, but that's not a true showcase of what being midwife's like. And we used to get a number of applications for sports programmes where it would just say, I love Manchester United, and it just didn't go into any information about the programme itself. It didn't go into the nitty-gritty of what we need to know about the person. So you really do need to showcase that you fully understand the programme, you understand the kind of career you can do from it and what you want to get from it as well.
I think one of the most common questions that I get asked, especially by parents and students applying to uni, do they actually get read? Do I need to actually spend that much time on it? Do admissions actually process and read them? Or is it more just a tick box sort of exercise?
Absolutely do get read. They absolutely do get read. They can mean the difference between getting a place and not getting a place. So if we have two applicants that have very similar results, very similar A-levels or BTEC results, similar GCSE results, it can come down to that personal statement in terms of who gets a place on the programme and who doesn't, because it really shows your understanding and your aptitude for the course, but it also shows that you care enough to submit a finessed and polished personal statement as well. Also, at Solent, I don't know if this is the same for all universities, but it's our academic staff that read the personal statements, and they actually provide one-to-one feedback on the parts that they particularly like on the statement as well. So they go through every single one.
So you also mentioned references.
Yeah.
And obviously for most students that might be a college advisor, career advisor, but obviously there's a lot of students who aren't at college and school anymore. So can they use other people as a reference? Could they use an employer? What's a good reference for those sort of more mature students who aren't in education anymore?
If you are a few years out of education, we would ask you to try and get hold of your old tutors or your old careers advisors and see if they're able to submit one retrospectively. If not, if you're in employment, then we can consider a workplace reference as well.
Okay, brilliant. And I suppose, can they submit submit their application before their references have come in, or do they need to wait for those references to come through?
They can submit without the reference, so we can get that retrospectively as well. What we would ask is that the person's quite proactive in trying to get that reference together, because I think the admissions team do quite a lot of chasing for those references in these instances. So we would always ask, submit without the reference if you have to, although not ideal, but then be very proactive in getting that reference as quick as you can, because we actually can't process the application forward until we get that reference through.
So my last question before we start moving on to looking at perhaps those that are applying a little bit later. With the UCAS application, obviously you mentioned you can apply for multiple universities at once. Would you send off 5 separate UCAS applications, or is it one application, one personal statement for all 5 universities?
It's one application and one personal statement for all 5 universities, which is why the personal statement cannot mention any particular university or any particular course. So do use those 5 choices. Do make sure that you don't cut yourself off straight away and only apply to one university with one university mentioned in your statement. That's not the way forward, or not what we would recommend doing anyway. The application itself, once you put it to your 5 universities and you put your 5 choices in, you will then hear back from them at different timelines throughout the cycle as well. So depending on when you submitted your application, the universities will have a deadline as to when they have to reply, and that will be in your UCAS track, so you can keep an eye on when you should expect to hear back.
Obviously we're talking about the deadline, and we're talking about applying after the deadline and the differences between the two. Do you have any top tips for how students can start getting their application put together nice and quickly? Maybe they have missed that January deadline. What would sort of be your top tips for getting an application put together nice and quickly outside of the personal statement?
Just relevant to the personal statement first, I would just say look at the resources that universities have on their websites to help with this. Look at the UCAS website. They've got a number of different resources around making that application and making the personal statement piece particularly. We hold a number of sessions around building your personal statement as well, so we'll be holding some over the next couple of weeks. What's really important is that you just use what's around. We had an open day on Saturday, and we had a personal statement hub as part of that, where you could actually bring your personal statement in and have it reviewed by a member of our schools and colleges team. Use what's available to you from within the universities that you're interested in. First bit of advice I'd give in terms of just getting started is pull that plaster off. Just make a UCAS account, look at what's needed, and just chip away at it at your leisure. The first kind of few steps in UCAS is putting in basic information: name, email address, date of birth, home address. And it's just doing that kind of admin and get that over and done with, because once you get started, you'll find you're in the swing of it. And actually, apart from the personal statement piece, the rest of it's relatively straightforward.
I think the key thing, when I remember applying to UCAS, really useful to get all your grades from your GCSEs and A-levels put together. I think that possibly took me the longest.
Yeah. I think we both applied as mature students.
Yes.
So we didn't just have it to hand.
No.
And we also didn't have the hand-holding of the careers advisors either.
No, makes a big
yeah,
difference,
it does.
doesn't it?
So make the use of them as well, because they are there to help you.
You mentioned universities responding.
Yeah.
What does that actually mean when you say responding? What kind of things could they respond with?
So essentially, universities will say whether they can make you an offer or not. The wording around it is a little complicated, but essentially, if you're successful in your application, you will either be made an unconditional or conditional offer. Unconditional means that you've met the terms of the offer, you can start with them that coming September, for example, and there is nothing else that you need to do. Conditional means that we can make you an offer, providing that in your A-level results or your BTEC results, you get X amount of UCAS points.
And can there on some courses be extra selection criteria, which could also affect whether you get a conditional or unconditional offer? So, for example, with Solent, if we're looking at that specifically, are there any other hurdles that students have to jump over outside of the UCAS application?
Absolutely. So it could be that you're made a conditional offer based on submitting a successful audition, attending a successful interview, or submitting a successful portfolio. So here at Solent, our programmes that typically require a portfolio sit within our art and design department. Interviews are for social work, nursing, sport journalism, education, and then auditions typically fall within acting and performance, musical theatre. So it could be that you are made an offer based on you then completing that next step as part of your UCAS application as well.
And I suppose every university will be slightly different.
Yeah.
Some universities might interview a little bit more.
Yeah,
some
absolutely.
might not interview at all. So I suppose to check the website. Would that be your key piece of advice?
Exactly that. It's whatever course you're interested in and the university that you're interested in, get all that information from their websites. It'll all be listed out there. We tend to do those additional selection criteria just as a way of us making sure that you will succeed on our programmes. We would never want somebody to enrol with us that hasn't got the skill set, the knowledge or the ability to flourish throughout our 3 or 4 year programmes. So we have that to make sure, you're suitable to do a fine art degree or you're suitable to do computer games and visual effects. We just want to make sure that you're going to be successful with us.
So we've talked about late submissions. We've talked about submissions before January and how to apply. So obviously, once you're made your offer, what happens? So let's say you've been made a conditional offer. Is there anything else you need to do before then, or is it just a case of waiting for your results to come through?
So once you've heard back from your universities, you then need to go back and let them know whether you want to accept the place or not. Again, with the terminology, it's slightly different to what you'd expect it to be, but your first choice is essentially what you would make your firm choice, and then your second choice is what you would make your insurance choice. So essentially, you pick your first and second, and then you would reject the other offers within your UCAS track. What's really important is that if you are made an unconditional offer and then you make it your firm choice, that means you have accepted your place to study with that university, for example, that coming September, and you have your place firmed up. You are on paper going to that university. Conditional choices, so conditional firm, that essentially means that, yes, you've got your place with your first choice, but you do just need to meet this additional criteria or the UCAS point requirement that we're looking for.
So it's quite important, I suppose you're saying, that students do really think carefully before making any firm choices, particularly if they're unconditional.
Yeah, exactly that.
Perfect. So obviously we've talked in the ideal world that you get conditional, unconditional offers. Let's say you got a conditional offer and then maybe you didn't quite get the grades you wanted. Maybe something went wrong in your personal life. Maybe you really struggled with a specific area. Maybe you've got neurodivergency and that affected the grades that you ended up with. Is that the end? Can I no longer go to university, or is there still some options?
There are definitely still options available. And at this point, what I'd be really keen to say is please do not try and worry about the worst case scenario. Universities are on hand. They want you to get a place with them. So at this point, just focus on your exams, your coursework, whatever it is you need to do in order to know that you've tried as hard as you can to get those results. If you don't get those results, the options are plenty, really. So if you don't get the results, what will normally happen is that a university will look at whether they can offer you a change in programme. So, for example, say you applied to ourselves and you were interested in sport and exercise therapy. We wanted 112 UCAS points and you got 84 UCAS points in your A-level results. Our admissions team will then look at your results, they look at your personal statement, and they will decide, this is on results day, whether or not we can still take you onto that main programme. If we can't take you onto that main programme, we will always offer a suitable foundation programme. So we have our sport foundation year that we could then offer you for a year. You would do that programme and then you'd go on to sport and exercise therapy. So we will always look at what options we can give ahead of you then not having a place at all. If you wake up on results day and you decide you don't want to go to the university you've accepted a place for, you can call around universities in clearing and look to see if there's another programme that you can be considered for, and you can apply elsewhere through clearing as well. So there are a number of different options.
And so you've mentioned foundation years there. Yeah. Just to double check with you, because until I came into this job, I didn't know what a foundation year was. What actually is a foundation year?
It's essentially a year's programme designed to really help bridge that gap between college study and university study, but also to get people back into education if you've had a bit of time out as well. So it's designed to get you ready with the study skills, the academic skills, the writing skills you need to succeed at university. But it also covers content relevant to you going on to the programme that you're interested in as well. So it's really this kind of bridge programme to just help that transition, make it a little bit easier. We do sometimes find that students who meet the terms of their offer, they've got the UCAS points they need, actually decide to go on a foundation year just to help ease them back into that level of study as well. So it is just this kind of year of, it's like a preparatory year really. It's let's get you ready to do a full undergraduate degree, because it is hard.
So with regards to clearing, if you've kind of not really heard about it, and I think certainly when I was at college talking about UCAS, I had never come across the concept of clearing. So does every university do clearing? Does it vary? And sort of where could a student start if they do find they haven't quite got the grades or they want to change their course?
What I would recommend is don't make any rash decisions. You know, call around, see what's available, think about your options, where you see yourself going, whether it's the right choice for you to change programme, change university, or even go at all at that point, because we would never want anyone to feel pressured into going to university if it's not the right time for them to do that. Clearing itself, a number of universities will drop their UCAS point requirement. So if a university is going to clearing, you may be able to get a place on that programme for less UCAS points than they would consider in that main UCAS cycle. It's not guaranteed and it's not across all programmes, so you'd be you'd have done very well to find medicine in clearing, for example. It just doesn't happen. But it might be that a programme you're interested in does go into clearing, you're not holding any offers anywhere else, or you don't want to go to the university you've applied to anymore. You can call up that university on A-level results day and say, look, these are my UCAS points, this is what I'm interested in, can you offer me a place on this programme? Their member of staff will go through a number of different questions with you. They'll ascertain whether they can make you an offer, and then typically they will make you an offer over the phone, and you then just need to refer yourself to that university via UCAS track later on that day when it opens again. Some universities take applications online as well. And I am also talking about clearing as though it's A-level results day. It's not. Clearing actually opens early July, but the main sort of bulk of results is on that A-level results day, that confirmation Thursday, middle of August. Clearing opens early July. So if you've got your results and you know that you're interested in going to uni, but you've not applied at that point, you can just call the clearing hotline in July and get a place then as well. As long as you've got your results, you can apply through clearing.
And I realise we've done that schools and colleges team again, where we've been throwing around some jargon that probably doesn't make sense to some people.
What did I say?
Points. What are UCAS points? Where can students get these magical points from? What do they mean? What do they equate to? It's so easy, I think, for us to forget that for someone starting out in this, it's all really unfamiliar. So what is a UCAS point and where does one acquire one?
UCAS points are one of the biggest or one of the hardest areas to get your head around, I think, as a student. I certainly remember being a bit baffled by it when I was putting my application in many moons ago. The analogy that worked best for me is, imagine you've got a beaker and then you've got cups of water of all the courses that you're studying, and they all carry different amounts of water depending on the grade that you're going to get. So if I'm getting an A in my history A level, I've got a really full beaker of water. If I'm predicted a D in my sociology A level, little bit less water in there. And essentially your UCAS points is you pouring all that water into your beaker. And once you've got your beaker full of all your courses, it will tell you how many UCAS points you've got in there.
Just to clarify, when you say courses, you mean things like A-levels, BTECs, sort of college level qualifications? Yep,
but it does, and I know we've said this so many times, it depends on the university that you're applying to. So A-levels, BTECs, you need to look at the individual entry requirements for the university you're interested in to know whether they will consider different programmes. Some universities won't consider BTECs. Some universities won't consider the EPQ, so the extended project qualification. It really does depend on where you're interested in as to what carries UCAS points for your application. The programme you're applying to may also have specific subjects, so you're not going to get onto veterinary science without some science A-levels. Which is what I actually wanted to do, but I studied English, history and sociology at A-level. So when it came to applying for UCAS, I thought, wow, I'm not getting on to being a vet, am I?
Well, it's funny you say I was the same with forensic science.
I feel like we've both made the wrong choices here.
A musical theatre BTEC did not get me far. But for me, I was lucky because where Solent does do it all by UCAS points. And I even found some extra things that I had done as extracurricular activities. So my Lambda acting exams, my singing exams that I did, which were all professional qualifications. They ended up actually equating to UCAS points, which I hadn't expected at all. And then before I knew it, my beaker was overflowing with UCAS points, which is great. Is there sort of anywhere else that's quite good for students to get information about specific courses and what universities are looking for? Sort of what's the best way for students to find that information?
Once you have got a bit of a shortlist together of universities that you're interested in, the next step is just get to an open day. I cannot stress this enough. Get to an open day, meet the staff, meet the academics, meet the other students, because that's a really good way of getting to know whether they're actually happy where they're studying as well. Get a feel for the city that you're going to be living in if you're moving away. Get a feel for the size of the university as well. So when it came to doing research for myself, I went to a course taster where it was myself and 200 other people in this lecture theatre. And the person next to me thought this was brilliant. There were so many people in there. It was this vibey atmosphere and everyone was going to get along with each other, which is lovely, and they probably did. But I sat in that sea of 200 people and thought, wow, this is not for me. I felt completely lost, completely overwhelmed. And I knew from that open day that a busy campus like that was just not for me. So I thought, right, I'll try another university, see if I can kind of mimic that smaller classroom teaching feel that we got at college, which is what I needed. I needed to feel like I wasn't just a face in a crowd or a student number. I needed to feel a smaller group to feel a bit more settled and a bit less overwhelmed. But that person next to me loved that. They thought, this is amazing. 200 people just on this programme. That's great. But that was just not great for me. And I only got that from going to open days.
And I think it's funny because when you're first looking at universities, you kind of, it feels like a blank page. You feel like you have no opinions.
And you also don't know what you're looking for. You're like, okay, great, this is a building.
You don't know where to start. But I always say to visitors on campus, you will know within the first 10 minutes. And actually, you are quite picky and you will have opinions that you probably didn't realise you have. And I always say to students, it's very much a gut reaction, and that 100%. Gut reaction you need to follow. But I think a big thing we say as a team when we're speaking to students is, you know, you will be investing money into this, and this is a product that you are buying into. you want to make sure that it's definitely what you want.
100%. And it's not just about getting to the open day and learning about the university, but exploring the city as well, because you mentioned it there, but logistically, if you're moving away, there's a big upheaval of your life to a new place for 3-4 years. And whilst it can be the most amazing experience, you don't want to get that wrong. You need to think, oh, can I live here for the next 3-4 years? Absolutely, I feel at home. I feel safe is a big one as well, and actually comfortable with the people that you meet on campus. So again, coming back to that, are the students happy? Do they seem happy? One thing which is also really good about open days, and we haven't really gone into this yet, is if you're torn between 3-4 courses. We're saying you've got to get your application in, you've got to pick your course, you've got to pick your uni. But if you're sat there, and this is a really common feeling, well, I kind of like graphic design, but I also quite like, history. But I also quite like the idea of doing law, because that's a big one I like the idea of a career in law. Completely torn between a number of different subjects. At university open days, you can sit in the course talks and you can, again, find out within a very short space of time whether you can then see yourself studying that programme for 3-4 years. It really does make a difference when you're speaking to the academics who are within those industries. They know the kind of careers that they lead on to. They know the kind of work involved in doing a degree in that area, what kind of thing you're going to go to, potentially specialise in. You will sit there and you'll think, do you know what, on second thoughts, I don't think this is for me. Or you'll think to yourself, oh my goodness, 100%, this is a programme I can see myself doing for the next 4 years. And you get that from an open day. It's that real experience.
Bringing this all right back to the beginning of the conversation, we've gone through a lot of information. But just to kind of rehash, because we are approaching that January deadline, and there may be people listening right now or in a few days who are thinking, oh my goodness, I've only got a couple of days to get my application in. What would you recommend they do? Should they try and bash out a fairly good application in a couple of days, but maybe not the best it could be, just to hit that deadline? Or should they take their time, wait till after the deadline and spend more time putting together a better quality personal statement application? What would your advice be, Sam?
That's a really tricky one, and it comes back to, it depends on the university and it depends on the course. So if you know you're applying to somewhere that is particularly competitive or a programme that is particularly competitive, I would actually recommend getting the application in before the deadline, just so you are part of that equal consideration deadline. If you know that the course or the programme or the university you're applying to isn't as competitive, then I would look to do it after that deadline and to really take your time with that personal statement. I would also say that in terms of getting that application in a couple of days, depending on the university you're interested in, I said it before and I have to say it again, use the resources available to you. That university wants to help you get your application in. You could even call the admissions team and say, look, am I better off doing this now and not taking the time, or would you actually still consider it fairly post that deadline as well? So go call them and just get an idea of the answers that are specific to your unique situation, because it does vary across the board.
And so you mentioned utilising resources. We can only speak on Solent's behalf, of course. What kind of resources do we offer at this point, at this time in the cycle? What should students be utilising?
So looking at online webinars, for example, looking at online tasters, in-person activities as well. So we've mentioned the open days already. Looking at pages dedicated to applications. So we've got our Personal Statement Hub webpage that can go through everything about what we're looking for. But also for us specifically, we have our UniBuddy platform. So you can chat to current students, you can chat to staff members, and it's essentially a platform where you can send a message through and you'll get an answer within 48 hours.
And this might sound like a silly question, but I remember worrying about things like this when I was applying to uni. If I were to sort of send in a question through UniBuddy or email or phone, would that affect my application at all? Are the two linked, or is it okay to send even those small questions into a university?
It has absolutely no bearing on your application whatsoever. It's completely separate teams that run the platform here, for example, but it's actually just a chance for you to ask those questions that you feel are really important to you, but you maybe haven't been able to find on the website for whatever reason. And it's that little bit of hand-holding as well, which I know we all appreciate now and again.
And so we've been talking for a very long time, and we could probably go on talking about applying to university and the UCAS cycle. But to sort of begin closing this up, what would your top piece of advice be to someone thinking about university in January, just before the deadline date? What advice would you give them?
Don't panic. Okay, there is this deadline, but at this stage, panic isn't going to be helpful to anybody. Start to do the research, start to look into courses, universities, where you might be interested in going, and then start the application, get that basic information together, and just start chipping away at that personal statement. There will always be an option available to you, whether it be a different course, a different university, or really, if needs be, waiting a year. Deferring a year is absolutely a viable option as well. Just do not panic. We want you to make the right choice. We want you to get it right first time round. Use the resources available and get in contact with me or Zoe if you need help with anything.
No, that's brilliant, Sam. Thank you so much for helping us straighten out this tricky subject. Again, we could talk on much, much longer, but I feel we've covered the key areas. And as Sam mentioned, you can always get in touch with Solent or any of the universities that you're thinking of applying to. And thank you for listening. We really hope that you found this episode helpful. But as mentioned, if you do have any questions, you can check out our handy guide to the uni application process, which we like to call 52 Things to Do. And you can find it on the Solent University website, and we've also linked it in the podcast description too. And of course, you can subscribe to us if you want to hear more from Solent and key points in the application cycle. Just subscribe to us here at University What, Why, How to get the next episode delivered straight to you when you need it. So looking ahead in the next few episodes, we'll be thinking about money, how to make it go further as a student, and also offering some of our top tips on exams to help you do the best you can and get the grades you need for your university place. Hopefully you'll join us, but until then, from me and the rest of the Southampton Solent team, take care of yourselves.